Good evening. Hello. What a lovely crowd. Testing, testing. I know you can all hear it. Wow, rowdy crowd tonight. I love it. I love a rowdy crowd. So, good evening. Welcome to our final reading of the 2022-2023 school year. Prout is finished up tonight. We have four fine readers tonight. I wanted to just make a quick announcement, which is that the Prairie Margins from last year has arrived, and we have free copies out in the back, so please grab a copy or two on your way out. Make sure that you make that part of your reading, your summer reading, and we'll get started with our first reader. I'm so happy tonight to introduce to you Gabriel Erb, your first reader. Gabriel is from Uniontown, Ohio, but his family has lived in Ohio for 7 generations. Gabriel is a man of many interests. He came to BGSU for economics, then switched to film, before joining his people in creative writing. He enjoys philosophy, theology, history, and waterfowl. That's right. While here, Gabriel has discovered a love for birds, particularly ducks because they are so plush and quacky, and geese because they are so boisterous. He also has a love of medieval memes, leading to one of the most hilarious presentations on InDesign typesetting that I have ever seen. About his BFA experience, Gabriel said he really enjoyed workshops, fixing little problems or big problems, finding different opportunities and solutions. He found he was greatly concerned with worth, as in finding something worth writing about, writing something worth reading. And he has. The story he will be reading for you tonight represents quintessential Gabriel, and not just the Gabriel that reminds me of a centuries-old vampire. It combines elements of the classic Greek chorus with the surreality of the symbolists, with the dark relationship drama of the Gothics. Gabriel has a deep and highly visual imagination and transfers those startlingly clear and evocative images directly into a reader's brain through his prescriptive and sometimes elliptical prose. Through image, Gabriel explores conflicts and immerses the readers fully in the senses, or distrust of them. For Gabriel, there is an important distinction between the thought experiment and the story. His stories, and they are very much stories, communicate through their characters who seek change, sometimes at great cost. They are, above all, worth reading, worth hearing. And here now, Gabriel.
Good evening. Good evening. I want to thank Abby for the introduction. I asked her to make it artistic, and she did not fail. Can you hear me in the back? Can you give a wave if you can hear me in the back? So I'm loud enough? Thank you. If you have not taken a class with Abby Cloud, I highly advise you to do so. I've taken several of her classes, and she's fantastic. It's surreal to look down from this perspective now. I switched my major, as she said, to creative writing from economics, and so my time in the program was even more condensed. Every semester just went faster and faster. It went by in a blink. But being here, I thought I'd give some advice for us writers. I would advise you to focus on people, because that's what we write about. We write about people. If you remove all the complexity, all the intricacy, all of it, we're writing about people. We even turn objects into people. Case in point, Frank. This stuffed animal, Frank, has become, for my workshops, a hero and a villain. He is the spirit of the Canadian wilderness. And that is absolutely ridiculous. But it's why we write. So focus on people. The world and all the people in it are wonderful and terrible. If they were only wonderful, there would be no conflict. If they were only terrible, why would we try? It's the combination of wonder and terror that gives us the ability to write. I wrote my thesis to explore this crisis of trying to live in a wonderful and terrible world. I'm reading the last story in my thesis tonight. It's a sort of culmination of that crisis. It's a special piece to me It was first inspired by some presentations I gave while on Benadryl, one of which was in Abby Cloud's class. Most people feel tired when they take Benadryl, but I just feel calm. The nervousness was still there, but I just didn't care. It's a very strange feeling. So the story started with Benadryl, with this feeling of emotional numbness, but became so much more, even in the first draft. Since then, it's become something else entirely. It has grief, tragedy, humor, confusion, regret, and in the end, well, I'll let you discover that. But to address this crisis, we're going to go on a trip through something like a dream. So sit back, strap in, and enjoy. This is Panacea. Mr. Garrow Douglas built the lounge his father would have dreamed about. It was a simple square. On each wall, a fireplace burned, and in each corner, an oak column. A fifth column stood away from the walls in the first third of the room. Unlike the others, it was an Egyptian column, carved from a walnut trunk and painted white, with the capital in blue, green, and red. A tufted leather sofa dominated the center of the room. The design of this Egyptian column crossed the ceiling over the sofa, where it originated, leaking in from a skylight at the far third. The table and chairs, along with the trim, were mahogany. The chairs were cushioned in absinthe green velvet. The desk was oak, thick and low as a boulder. The bookshelves, display cases, and picture frames were cherry, as were the mountings and cornices. For the fireplace mantels, he returned to dark walnut. Above each, a trophy, a boar, a panther, a vulture, and a sword. For metals, he used gold everywhere practical and gilded bronze anywhere where greater strength was needed, such as bases and around the heat of the fireplaces. A rug spanned the room, sinking with heavy navies and reds. The greatest painting was a ship on a raging sea, the storm above and below, as though signaling the arrival of a devouring monster. Garrow's new refuge was contradictory, larger yet cramped, freshly finished but historic, tranquil though restless. It was a haven from newness, from the spirit of the age, from the choking cord of technology. When the world went cordless, he sunk into building it to escape the invisible noose. By design, he sought the decrepit, but once strong. He avoided all contemporary mockeries and facsimiles in his construction. The room was bathed in craftsmanship and the glory of handiwork, in the aroma of the past. It was a dream from when the world had more to uncover, when hands were the true tools men lived by. He poured a decade of thought and material into the room before it was done. A year before retirement, he finished, but waited until the day of to christen it. On that morning, he brought in his tobacco and smoked one of his father's pipes. 7 months later, Garrow knew the position of the door handle from the dark hallway and no longer wasted time with switches. He strode in, shut the door, and locked it with a firm, comfortable click. Long matches by the entry, he lit all 4 fireplaces. Remembering to time himself, lest his wife should find him, he picked a watch at random from his collection drawer and rested on the smoking sofa. Garrow tried to cure the fog of retirement with the puff of tobacco. It failed him, so he turned to other devices. He set down his pipe in a holder that he wouldn't set the room on fire. Underneath the end table, he drew out an unmarked jar from a hidden compartment. Brown fruits moved beneath the glass. Garrow popped the lid and palmed one carefully to avoid bleeding. The husk of a thorn apple was covered in spikes. When properly aged, however, the seams split and the husk peeled back to release the seeds inside. The plant which bore the fruit was called the devil's trumpet. Trumpet for the soft white flowers which resembled a horn, devil for the effects when ingested. In years prior, Garrow experimented with every substance he could acquire, courtesy of his brother, but found them all lack luster. Too man-made, and artificial. There was no nuance to them, no proper unpredictability, and easy calculations could be made for danger. The devil's trumpet was a beast, hard to track, hard to judge, and in the hand, hard to hold. He found its history in old journals and diaries. The deeper he poured, the more terrible it became. Sorcery, necromancy, poison, suicide, spirit stealing, a necessary ingredient in flying ointments, and voodoo zombification. It was nature's horror. Unlike LSD or psilocybin, the effect was not hallucination, but delirium. Hallucinations, Garrow felt, were tricks of the eyes and ears. A distracting fantasy, but the distinction between the real and the fake was noticeable. When he delved into the delirium of Devil's Trumpet, that fragile barrier tore like a veil. He limited himself to 1 or 2 seeds per day, which granted him potency with less risk of the adverse effects of heavy dosing. Judging the weight of the thorn apple in his palm, he shook the seeds inside, a hefty chunk, and considered. Garrow felt the stir of the monster swimming within him, that destructive monster in a lake of black blood. Thick desire choked him. He tipped all the seeds down his throat. He prepped a glass of water for the dryness and rested back. The leather sofa was warm under him. The distortions came without announcement, creeping in like afternoon clouds. The lounge slipped into shadow. The fire darkened while the oil lamp on his end table dimmed and went out. Tendrils drifted from the upper corners and cornices, webbing white as moonlight. Multitudes of spiders rose from their dens and shuffled across the walls, ceiling, and floor. He closed his eyes and thought of dress shoes shuffling through a conference hall. The hands on his Rolex were stuck, but twitching. Garrow found himself petting a spider and wiped it off his lap. His mind was numb with radio static. It surprised him how soothing radio static could be. He took a sip of water to ease his dry throat. His tongue was numb from the touch of the seeds. The empty peeled pod was lonely on the side table. He tossed it into the nearest fireplace. Patting his fist into his palm, he played with his fingers and resolved that he would remember how he got there. The pod, the seeds, the fireplaces, the water. Bring me back. He thumped his head with his hand. Bring me back, bring me back, bring me back. Garrow rolled out of bed with the urge to weep. He felt more twisted than the old brass headboard. His wife Charlotte was in the dreaming pod, which he refused to use, just as she refused the bed. Flashes and flashes, now moonlight, muted by blinds, lit the kitchen. The blue stream of grass cradled his pot, tickling the copper with such gentleness he fell asleep standing up. The smoking scent woke him. He reached for his father's enamel cup, chipped and hidden at the back of the cabinet. Steam wisped up his face, dampening it like sweat. The boiling black burnt his lips with a wicked sip. He spit it into the sink. Then he drew another. He spit that one too. Why drink? Why not drink? He tipped up the whole cup, and as it spilled over his lips, flashes and flashes. A caterpillar dragged its glandular body across the railing. He was on the balcony now, flashes and flashes without end. The slow slinking placed him back in the chair, rocking along to the curling of the caterpillar. He stood up to flick the bug, but spotted 3 more following from the other side of the rail. Useless. It was all useless. He wanted to melt. His cup fell and bounced, so terrible and violent. He reached to grab it before it could pierce his heart any further. It was gone, and the wood was woolly, now carpet. A door was in front of him. Drawing his robe for a key, he checked all 4 pockets and found none. He twitched the handle, but it did not budge. Garrow knocked lightly, then shook his head. The key was in the middle of his office floor, where he locked himself off from his walls of work 7 months prior. Garrow was a company man. He worked for dozens of companies. He twisted his fist and slammed it into the door. Perfect, flashing pain. He sat in the lounge. He never moved. His knuckles were bruised. What a terrible morning he endured. He understood why he palmed the entire pod. Was there any other choice? Always. Never. He coughed and reached for his glass, brushing off the cobwebs. The only real detriment was the dryness of his mouth and the exasperation of his sprinting heart. These were fangless, however, as significant and relevant to his mind as a drift of wind. Garrow unclasped the silver watch, now too heavy, and let it fall on the back of a spider crossing his feet. It clicked in his ears and was still on his wrist. He stood up and threw it off again, but it reappeared. A bell tower struck in his cabinetry, ringing, clanging, so wretched and loud. He wrenched out his collection drawer, the sound muffled by wood. It was unbearable. He rushed to the nearest fireplace and dumped all the watches in. They clashed and clattered. The fire spit out metal bits. Time spilled all over the floor. When he grabbed the pieces, they vanished. The crackling fires beat like drums, and the flames burst into gray. The whole room was sapped of color, like the old films his father watched. If it was a film, then he was in it. Everything had a grain to it, a there-ness and a not-there-ness, a flatness and a depthlessness worth falling into. It was quaint, dark, terrible. An empty set, stuck in a monotonous stillness, demanding the presence of actors, of action, of some almighty conflict. It was the boar that spoke first. Old boar. Garrow hunted it, but only finished it once it was down. His older brother Bradley took the first shot. The panther was next. Unlike the boar, it was Bradley's in full. Garrow stayed behind to help his pregnant wife. Likewise, it was a full body, not merely a head. Bradley gave it in recompense for his loss. It paced the mantle. The vulture was last, but not lesser. The vulture was a gift from one of Bradley's co-workers and co-conspirators. Bradley pawned it off to Garrow for a sum. He already had an eagle. He did not want a vulture. The sword did not move. It was a sword. It looked resplendent, though, a curved cavalry saber from wars past. What a waste you've become, said the boar. What do you mean? A guru of finance, and now a master of nothing. You were happy then, the boar answered. I was not. Oh, but you could have been, answered the panther. How? You should have taken your brother's deal. He was never caught. You could be in the tropics. The panther spoke with a snake-like hiss and paced his mantle. Tell that to his patsy. He died in prison. Better a prison there than a prison here. The vulture flexed his wide wings. No, his brother was the problem. He held him back. Everyone holds him back. He should have made his own company. The boar sniffed with an apparent sinus problem, likely the lack of lungs. He'd still be working if that was the case. But I agree, Charlotte holds him back. If he'd divorced her after the stillbirth, he could have married that secretary with the freckles. He'd at least have children then. Shut up! Garrow hurled a book at the panther, but it dodged. A decent thought, but the hard way. If he went with Bradley hunting, he'd have missed the birth and couldn't have talked her into fighting to live, the vulture reasoned. Damn you! Garrow threw another book. True, she'd be more useful than she is now, the panther said. To your earlier credit, the vulture continued, if he had taken the deal, then he would have been in the tropics. Could have stopped Bradley's suicide. He tried a vase this time, the vulture shielded with its feathers. 5 days after Garrow retired, I felt the timing was rather harsh, the boar said. I thought it was using the same drug that was the problem. His brother died at 3 pods. He's almost there. Once or twice more, said the panther. I laughed at the irony myself, though didn't want to bring it up. He's sensitive, chuckled the vulture. Hey, what was that for? Asked the boar, wounded. It couldn't dodge out of the way. Think practically. It's not too late for a divorce. What was that? The panther asked. I'm having trouble. Go on. The boar went into a wheezing fit. True, but if he can't face his wife, he'd be hard-pressed to find someone else for children, even if he led with all his money, said the vulture. Fair enough. If he leads with money, they might use him for it, said the panther. He should go back to work, the boar squeezed out. No, he should get a divorce, the panther disagreed. I say, burn it all down, the vulture demanded. End it. Work, divorce, burn. Work, divorce, burn. Work, divorce, burn. Their voices rose in a chant. Stop or I'll kill you all again, Garrow yelled. You didn't the first time, the panther said. You'll die before us, the vulture said. Garrow went for the sword, fanning cobwebs and kicking away spiders to reach it. There was a knock at the door. Charlotte's voice came through. Hey, get dressed. We have a dinner guest. Yes, I'll be right there. Garrow stared around the room. The spiders vanished with their webbing, and the trophy stood still. All the color returned. Oddities upon oddities. He waited for her to be well away from the door, double-checking that the animals were not fooling him behind his back, and then started off to his wardrobe. He changed through a blur into a scarlet robe and threw a few gold pins in his hair. He did not remember Charlotte telling him about a dinner guest the night before. He could not remember the last time he spoke to her about anything. She was a shadow, an uneasy silhouette, the hole in the wall hidden behind the painting of a ship on a roaring sea. He crossed the open house to the dining room, the only one lit. Darkness, it seemed, still subsumed the outside, but no moonlight filtered through. He checked his watch, forgetting he swapped it out for a bracelet of chalky carnelian beads. His table was a block carved of alabaster, indented for the needs, but still a solid piece. The guest was sitting, already eating from his plate. He saw the dishes, the way they were carefully placed, and how if one moved their eyes quick enough, a brief shimmer floated across them. He doesn't count as company. Sure he does, Charlotte said. Come sit. Garrow sat at the head, with Charlotte to his left and the guest to his right. Faint music coming from nowhere and everywhere dimmed whenever they spoke. Charlotte, I'd rather eat alone. The guest smiled his pre-programmed face and asked between holographic bites, Rough day, Garrow? We all have them. Charlotte, turn him off. No, he's good company. He likes my cooking. It's delicious, the guest responded. I don't want him here. The meal machine bell chimed. Garrow, would you get that? The meal machine was on the counter behind him. Garrow stood up and popped the door. He grabbed the platter, meatballs in a thick red sauce. The guest continued to smile, and Garrow had never met Charlotte's gaze. A tickle caught him, and glancing down, a spider crawled onto the top of his hand. He pitched the tray, swatting off the spider. The sauce streaked across the white table and through the guest like a blood spatter. Garrow felt around for the spider. What an accident, brother. Charlotte, you got some on you. Here, take this napkin. The hologram pointed to a napkin on the table, already in Charlotte's reach. She was not paying attention to the guest. She was watching Garrow as he hunted for the spider. What are you on, Garrow? You have your pod, and I have mine. Stop killing yourself, Garrow, said Charlotte. I must say, that sounds highly illegal, said the hologram. Turn him off now, Garrow said. I thought he'd help your mood, Charlotte said, searching for the remote. Bradley's dead. I don't want to see him. I don't want to see you for the same reason. Charlotte paused, perplexed. I forgot. You were dreaming away the months. You didn't care. This is all terribly confusing, said Bradley. Garrow threw the tray through the hologram's face. With a tap on the remote, the holograms disappeared, along with the music and the excess dishes. Garrow, what do you want? With the table between them, he turned. Her eyes. He had not seen them in a decade. They were the same as when she held their stillborn baby in her arms, the same as the day she started sleeping in her pod alone, the same as the love of his wife, who was now just his wife. The white she was wearing was a hospital gown, and the sauce poured blood from her stomach. Everything was losing its color. Spiders crawled over her shoulder. She was all shadow, a wraith. What, Garrow? He rushed off down the hall and into his lounge. The animals chanted and his vision was grainy. Never again. He slapped his face, fighting the delirium. Never again. He shook his head and gnashed his teeth. He splashed water across his face and the color back into the room. Garrow strode to the far wall and grabbed the sword off the mantel. It was good and cold in his hand. He ran down the hall to the bedroom. Never again. He knocked the door open. Charlotte whirled. No more! He raised his sword and jumped forward. She screamed. The blade bit into the flimsy plastic pod. It caught and he tore with 3 violent strikes. The red light of the seal flashed and died. The whole upper lid crushed. No more! Never again! He leapt onto the bed and cracked down on the brass headboard. He cut the bars like bones. They broke off and flung. Charlotte took cover behind the ruined pod. He grunted and growled. Garrow stepped off the bed, desecrated beyond repair. Charlotte peeked over the lid. With one last bout of force, he twisted and plunged the sword through the mattress. The hilt stuck out of the sheets. Plastic and brass were no match for hardened steel. Charlotte, his breathing was ragged. She slipped around him to the door. Wait, Charlotte, look at me. I don't want to. Yet she froze in the doorway with her back turned. I do. I want to see you again. She held the frame for support as she turned, ready to spring out at any time. Her gaze fluttered up from the floor to his, but in those teary eyes, he looked without fear or malice. It was just her, with eyes cracking like eggshells, so brittle for so long, trying to hold together. He took her hand. The sofa in the lounge was the only place to sleep. He drowned out the flames with his water pitcher so the animal heads weren't as visible. A touch of moonlight still filtered in through the skylight. It was cold without the fires. There was no heat but the 2 of them. Lying on opposite sides of the sofa under a shared bearskin, Charlotte pretended to sleep, while Garrow was in agony. Even with his hands cupped over his ears, he could not block out their jeering. Twisting into the leather, he trembled at the mounted demons, which had not stopped echoing their sentiments since the 2 lay down. Work, divorce, burn. The words churned the lake of black blood with a destructive desire to burn them, no matter the cost. He scanned across the spiders for the matches. A sound like the spiders crawling, but different, singular and smaller, interrupted him. Charlotte's teeth chattered. She grabbed her chin to stop the drumming. She lost control of her shivers and was balled up to no avail. Garrow tried to look away, to stare at the high ceiling, but the spiders dropping from lines overhead made him grimace. Had anything really changed? No. 2 sides of the bedroom, 2 sides of the sofa. Death and cold lay in between. Could it ever change? It must. It must. Never again, he had said. Never again. What use was it? Every use. No use. The only use, yes, more of it, even if it would not work, even then. Under the bearskin, her leg was inches from his. That gap was a chasm, appearing impassable and dropping down to the lake of black blood. If he missed, a long fall into the monster's jaws. If he reached the other side, was there anything more worthy? Garrow leapt, nudging Charlotte with his leg. She flinched at the touch and drew away. His heart fell. He plummeted down into flashes and flashes. Bradley, his father, his baby, and Charlotte. Everything that could have been, that should have been, everything lost and wasted. Everything lost in the onrushing wave of black blood, in a life amounted to a single black splash. The matchbox was at the far end of the room. He sat up, but felt an icy clutch. Charlotte held on to him like the hand of death. The monster snapped, its jaws just out of reach. She crawled to him, and he felt her eggshell eyes in the dark, as hesitant and as hoping as his own. He opened the cover for her, and her frosted form fit on his. He subdued a gasp of pain. The cold shock was a bitter medicine. Never had it tasted so sweet. The chill pierced his mind. It cleansed and irradiated the voices. The boar, panther, and vulture were frozen, forevermore stiff and still creatures. Garrow held Charlotte's hand and her whole body tight to ease her shivering. She brushed his face. They floated deep in quiet breathing and shared tears. Together, wrapped hand in hand, they were warm through the night. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. Hello, Frank. My name is Mike Scholes. I'm a teaching professor in the English department, creative writing program, for those of you who don't know me. And it is my pleasure to introduce our next writer tonight, Abigail Chinook. Abby has been writing since the 4th grade and says she can't imagine not being a writer. She enjoys reading, drawing, and making comics. She says the best thing that happened to her during her BFA experience was being part of the Mid-American Review internship. And her advice for BFA students is to write whatever weird stuff you want to write and be unapologetic about it. For Abby, that often means not apologizing for writing with happiness and joy. For writing about relationships tinged with nostalgia, for writing about women familiar to us all whose voices need to be heard. For taking us to places of her youth. Abby is from Tucson, Arizona. She's lived in Maryland, Oklahoma, Texas, even Korea, and her experiences living in so many places provide a variety of authentic settings for her stories. Carefully placed in these settings, are characters faced with challenges that test their ability to remain true to themselves. Whether it's a young girl protecting fairies from capture, young women navigating friendships through major life events, or trusting a partner to support you when you chase down someone you don't even know in an airport. Abby's fiction reveals what she values, the moments and conversations between people that help them figure out who they are. And through her stories, we get to learn about who she is as well. Please help me welcome Abigail Chinook.
I've done a lot of traveling in my life, and in that traveling involves airports. And I realized that I've never really read any stories set in airports before. And so I wanted to write that, and so that's where this story comes from. The layover. Olivia woke with a jolt as the plane met the runway. Her cheek bumped into the edge of the window, and she straightened in her seat. Beside her, Ted was gripping both armrests, jaw set and eyes wide. Ted, Olivia knew, thought that the plane moved too fast when landing, and felt, though he knew it was irrational, that the nose would be driven into the ground and the tail would flip up and over the plane, and the plane would come to rest upside down, leaving the passengers dangling in their seats until they could be rescued. Ted was a big fan of seatbelts. Olivia patted his right hand on their shared armrest, and the plane slowed to a crawl as it taxied across the runway. Ted relaxed and she pulled the window cover up and peered outside the plane, trying to see Detroit. All she could see was a wing. She had never been to Detroit before, nor even Michigan, and wouldn't be seeing Detroit now. There was only an hour before their flight back home to Baltimore, so Olivia would hardly even get to see the airport. She turned to Ted. "Does it count if it's a layover?" she asked. He looked at her sideways. "I feel like I'm missing some context." "Like, I've never been to Detroit before, but now I have," she said. "Or does it not count if it's just a layover?" "I've always thought it only counted if you spent the night." "But what if, say, you and I decided to drive to Annapolis just for lunch and then drove back home? That would count." "Then you have to get a meal there," he said. "Or maybe you just have to leave the airport." "Fine," Olivia said. The pilot reminded them not to unbuckle until the plane came to a complete stop. Ted turned his phone off of airplane mode and checked the Delta app. "What gate are we pulling into?" Olivia looked out the window again. She couldn't see their own gate, but she could see the gates beside it. "A6, I think," she said. "Either that or A7. "Our next flight is out of A57, Ted said. "How big is this airport?" Olivia asked, turning to look over his shoulder as if his electronic boarding pass would have a map attached to it. It didn't. The plane stopped moving, and a beat passed before the seatbelt light turned off, and the clicking sound of everyone on the plane unfastening their seatbelt at once filled the air. Olivia was short enough to stand without having to hunch under the lower ceiling over the seats, and she did, twisting to stretch out her back. Ted stayed seated. The old man in the aisle seat was not short enough to stand without hunching, but stood anyway, nearly bumping his head. Olivia wondered if the mom and kids in the row across from them were doing okay, but she couldn't see around the old man. But the baby hadn't cried once during the entire flight, and that was good enough for her. The row in front of her had an empty window seat, and the man and girl who were waiting to disembark both had bright red hair. The girl was young, maybe 5 or 6, her hair in 2 braids tied with yellow ribbons. She was bouncing, clearly ready to get off the plane. Olivia agreed with her, remembering when she was a kid and the deplaning process seemed to take forever. She craned her neck to see if there was any movement in the aisle ahead of her. People filed off the plane, stopping briefly to get their stuff out of the overhead compartments. Olivia had always wondered if there was some way to speed up the process. Maybe let people without overhead bags out first. The red-haired duo, father and daughter, Olivia assumed, went up the aisle and the old man reached for his overhead bag. Ted leapt out to help him lower it, and the man thanked him before leaving. He let the mother and her kids in the row beside them go first as Olivia slung her backpack over her shoulders. Ted reached up for his own overhead bag, and Olivia realized that the little girl in the row ahead of them had left a stuffed bunny rabbit on her dad's seat. Olivia picked it up as she passed by. "The poor kid," she thought, looking at the bunny. It was purple, or at least it used to be. The bunny was well-loved and somewhat gray. She looked up ahead, hoping to see the father and daughter still on the plane. All the passengers ahead of them were leaving the plane or already gone. The only people who lingered were the flight attendants standing in the emergency exit row and the pilots gathered up at the front, thanking the passengers as they left. The jetway was also empty, but once they were released into the terminal, Olivia spotted a shock of red hair. "Come on," Olivia said, grabbing Ted's sleeve and pulling him. "What's going on?" he asked, sprinting behind her. The airport was crowded, and A6 was at the very end of the building, so gates 1 through 6 were also in the area. One of those gates was boarding, and Olivia ducked around people, trying not to let the father's red hair out of her sight. "The kid in front of us left her bunny," she said, showing Ted the toy. It flopped over in her hand. "We have to get it back to her." "Did you see what she looked like?" One of Olivia's favorite things about Ted was that he was always willing to at least entertain the idea of following Olivia when she was on a tangent. "Yeah, they were both redheads," Olivia said. She spotted the father getting on one of the moving walkways. "There!" A large group of people got onto the walkway before Olivia and Ted could. "Aw, come on," she complained. "Our layover's really short," Ted said. "Boarding starts in like 20 or 30 minutes. You might want to just give that to a gate agent or something." "But what if this is their stop and they're leaving the airport?" The gate agent could probably call them. I just want to help. And that's admirable, but I can't miss our flight, Ted said. I have work tomorrow. We won't miss our flight, Olivia said. She had work the next day too. A woman's cool voice reminded them to watch their step when exiting the walkway. Olivia looked around, but couldn't find the man or the daughter. She and Ted were standing beside a bathroom, so perhaps they went in there, or maybe they peeled off and went to a gate. Or they went on to the next moving walkway, either for a further gate or the baggage claim. Thank God the terminal seemed to be rectangular, with no offshoots leading to different sections. Do you see them? Ted asked. Olivia shook her head, but she would not be deterred, and so she marched on, walking beside the moving walkway just in case she saw them come out of the bathroom or spotted them at a gate. She looked around for the flash of red hair. The little girl had been wearing a yellow dress, she thought, but she couldn't remember what the dad had worn. Liv, our gate is so far away. It'll be fine, Olivia said. Are you sure? Olivia looked back at him. His eyes were wide and his fingers tapped rapidly on the handle of his suitcase. Olivia knew he was about to start flipping out. She looked around, eye catching on a sign that informed her that the baggage claim, the train, and gates A25 through 78 were straight ahead. Tell you what, Olivia said, glancing at the time on her phone. You take the train to our gate, and if you see them on the train... I don't even know what they look like, Ted protested. Dad is tall and has red hair, and the girl's like 6 and also has red hair, Olivia reported. I think she's in yellow, 2 braids for sure. She might be upset because she's missing her rabbit. Why are you so hung up on this? I don't know, she said, even though she did. I mean, I'll tell you on the plane, but you should go wait at our gate. I'll text you. Are you sure? Olivia looked at his round brown eyes and reached out, cupping his cheek with her palm. She got up on her tiptoes and gave him a brief kiss, meeting his eyes when he pulled away. Positive. Okay, Ted said. Okay, keep me updated. With clear reluctance, he took off, dragging his rolling carry-on behind him. Olivia didn't want to send him away, but returning the rabbit wasn't important to him. Not the way it was for her. Even if she missed their flight, this way he wouldn't. She peered into a Hudson News store that she passed by, but didn't see any redheads. She kept walking. The terminal was huge, and she wasn't sure if they had gone to a restaurant, or maybe they had taken the train, or maybe they were behind her somehow, or had stopped at a gate or something. Maybe she should ask the gate agent after all, she thought, but brushed the thought away. She could do this. She could find them. She swerved left and got onto a moving walkway, power walking across it. She spotted someone with red hair at gate 830, but when she did a double take, she realized it was a grown woman. Olivia looked at the rabbit still clutched in her hand and wondered if maybe the daughter had realized she left her rabbit and made her father turn back. They were back at gate A6 right now, no bunny to be found. What would she do then? She got off the moving walkway onto the next one. Jesus, this airport really was massive. Way up ahead, there was a big fountain on the left, and on the right was McDonald's, then a P.F. Chang's. She had never heard of a P.F. Chang's in an airport before. There was a sign hanging from the ceiling that pointed right, pointing out the baggage claim. Olivia turned her head as she passed, and there was a wide hallway that ended in escalators going downward with shops lighting the way. The middle was filled with big electronic departure and arrival signs. She scanned the area, hoping they weren't inside one of the shops. A flash of red from behind her caught her eye. She turned. Oh, just an oversized gumball machine. An oversized gumball machine with someone behind it. Olivia doubled back. Tucked on the other side of the gumball machine was a little girl with braided red hair and a yellow dress, bawling her eyes out. Her dad kneeled beside her, hands on her shoulders. Olivia approached them carefully, not sure how she missed them the first time she walked by. It's okay, kiddo, the dad was saying, rubbing a thumb along her collarbone. We'll find her. The little girl blubbered something unintelligible. Excuse me, Olivia said. The father turned to look at her. The little girl wailed. I was on your plane with you just now, and I found this. She held out the bunny. The girl turned to look and screamed, an ear-splitting, joyous sound. Bun Bun, she yelled, reaching for the rabbit, and Olivia parted with it gratefully. The girl buried her snot-covered face in the rabbit's gut. The father stood up, bracing his hands on his knees. Thank you so much, he said, eyes wide in earnest. You don't know how much this means to her. I can imagine, Olivia said, watching the girl hug her bunny. The dad picked up his daughter, holding her against his hip. What do you say? He asked her. Thank you, the girl cried, flashing a gap-toothed grin. Olivia grinned back. It was no problem at all, she said. I was glad to do it. The little girl curled against her father, holding the bunny snug to her chest. Thank you again, the dad said. You've just saved us so many tears. She's had Bun Bun forever, and even if we found the same kind of bunny online, my mom gave it to her, so it wouldn't be the same. Olivia couldn't stop smiling and thought she may start crying. Again, I was happy to help. Thank you so much, the dad said yet again, and then he turned to go. Olivia stood and watched. The little girl peered over her father's shoulder and made Bun Bun wave her floppy purple hand. Olivia beamed, waving back, and the daughter and father turned right, heading toward baggage claim. Olivia's phone buzzed against her thigh, and she startled. Shit, she had a flight to catch. She did an about face and scanned the busy hall. A sign told her that the escalators by the P.F. Chang's went to the train, and she ran, trying not to slam into anybody. She hopped onto the escalator and wondered if Ted would leave without her. On the platform, a sign said the train to the North Station ran every few minutes. Olivia bounced on her toes as she waited. She was afraid to check the time and afraid to see whatever text she received. The train rolled up and stopped. The doors opened at a snail's pace, and the throng of people poured out before Olivia could get on. She grabbed onto a pole and tried to stay as close to the doors as possible. For a moment, she was excited to go on both a plane and train on the same day, but then she pushed the thought aside as the train started to move. She held tight onto the pole and hoped her backpack wouldn't hit anybody. She dared check her phone. The time made her wince. There was a text from Ted that read, "Didn't see any ginger father-daughter duos at the gate. You coming?" She unlocked her phone and sent out a quick "on my way." The train stopped. Once the doors opened, she shot out and ran down the escalator. It dropped her right in front of gate A57. She turned to face the gate, dread pooling in her gut. All the seats were empty. But Ted was there, standing right beside the ticketing desk. Olivia beamed and ran over to the gate, pulling out her boarding pass as she went. Ted lit up when he saw her. "I'm here," Olivia said. "I made it." "Good," Ted said. They scanned in and went into the jetway. There were a few people still waiting in line to get on the plane, so Olivia hadn't been very late after all. "How'd it go? Did you find her?" "I found her," Olivia said. Ted put his arm around her and squeezed. Olivia laughed, relieved. "Oh, okay. I wanted to tell you why that mattered so much." "It's okay," Ted said. "If it's important to you, it's important to me." "You dork," Olivia said. Ted laughed. He had given her an out, but she wanted to tell him. All her life, Olivia's grandma had been an avid crocheter. When Olivia was born, her grandma had made her a blanket. Olivia loved that blanket. It was baby pink and crocheted with love. It had been her constant companion since birth, and she couldn't sleep without it. By the time she was 8, it was falling apart. Her parents had taken her to visit some friends in Pittsburgh, and they were supposed to stay there for 4 days, but on the 3rd day she'd eaten something bad and thrown up everywhere. They'd left a day early, but Olivia's blanket had been put in the wash with her sheets and pajamas. By the time she'd realized they'd left it behind, they'd been back home. The friends mailed her pajamas back to her, but thrown away the tattered blanket, assuming it was a rag. And it wasn't like the discarded blanket haunted Olivia's every waking thought, but she remembered it. And she hadn't known if that bunny was as important to the little girl as her blanket had been to her. Obviously, she had no idea, but maybe it had been. And Olivia just couldn't refuse the chance to help her. "It feels kind of stupid, though," Olivia said as they stepped onto the plane. "It's not stupid," Ted said. "It was traumatic. And you just saved that kid from the same trauma," which is very noble, by the way. They reached their seats, and Olivia ducked into the row. Ted put his bag into the overhead compartment. Olivia tucked her backpack under the seat in front of her and peered out the window. Down below, workers were loading suitcases onto the plane. "You're that little girl's knight in shining armor." "Well," Olivia said. Ted handed her his book as he buckled his seatbelt. "I don't know about all that." "Either way," Ted said, taking his book back. "Maybe just this once it can count." "What can?" "Detroit," Ted said. "I say you can tell people you've been here. You didn't eat, you did save 3 lives, the dad, the kid, and the bunnies." "Oh," Olivia said, pleased. As the plane took off, she looked out the window, watching Michigan get smaller and smaller. And she thought of herself, 8 years old and crying about the blanket. And she thought about that little girl going home with Bun Bun tucked safely under her arm. Olivia smiled. She reached for Ted's hand, laced their fingers together, and watched the world vanish below the clouds. Thank you.
Okay, halfway point, everybody stretch, take a deep breath. Whatever you need to do, get your mind right. All right. It is my pleasure to introduce our next writer, Eric Scott. Eric is from Fort Wayne, Indiana, what calls the crossroads of I-75 and I-90 his home. He loves daydreaming about worlds and dramatic character flaws while speeding down highways. He enjoys visual storytelling, finding ways to get an image across to a reader, not just an idea, which has led to what he calls an unforeseeable enjoyment of poetry. Shocking. Eric also enjoys video games, dogs, and history, but he says the best thing that happened to him during his BFA experience is, quote, "I fell in love with the love of my life." Aww, appropriate awe. This sincerity and deliberate awareness becomes clear when you read Eric's work. Whether poetry or fiction, Eric's writing tells a story. It could be his story, mentally wrestling with language. It could be an old man working through grief. It could be a traveling salesman who has something to learn, or a couple reeling from a son's illness. Eric's stories immerse readers in the moment. They force us into the setting, into the scenes, and we have no choice but to be present. The ability to keep our attention, to pique our interest, are a testament to his craft and imagination. So enjoy the moment. Enjoy his language, enjoy his imagination, his world. Please help me welcome Eric Scott.
Anyone hear me? I have no fancy speech to begin mine, so let's just get into the story. The title of this piece is called Mercy. Now, as for your 5502s, you'll need to fill them out and have them signed and submitted by the 7th of January. Which ones were those? It has 4 pages. The second one is kind of shaped like a mountain range if you looked at it sideways. Elizabeth spun her tax form sideways and flipped it on the second page. It kind of did remind her of a trip to the Appalachians, almost, kind of, if you squinted. Got it. By the 7th, you said? Of January, next year, yep. She scribbled the date on a sticky note, tore it off, and stuck it onto the table next to a shrew of other sticky notes, each belonging to their own form. The table before her was covered in DD-12s, 5502s, F-77s, and other meaningless tax forms or debt forms or letters from the bank or the hospital. She was drowning in paper. She leaned back in her chair and stretched out her wrists and fingers. She had been on the phone with Adam, the obnoxious accounting guy, since 10 this morning, and she was feeling it. She fidgeted in her chair against the wooden grooves, trying to find some new way to sit that might be more comfortable. Anything else at all? She asked aloud. That's it on my part. Now you just have to do it. Elizabeth silently choked the air, gritting her teeth in anger at the stupid comment. Of course she had to do it. That wasn't the question. The question was if she could pull it off and still keep the car, or at least the house. She put a smile back on and said, "Thank you. Then I'll call her if I have any more questions." "You do that." She heard Adam hang up, and with it she breathed a long sigh, resting her eyes on the shelf of trophies on the opposite wall from her. Her husband, Abbott, had won them all over 2 years ago from various local hunting contests. Largest buck of 1998, most duck killed in 2002, second heaviest turkey in 1986. She was particularly fond of that last one. The trophy was probably made of cheap grass at best, cheaper plastic at worst, but he'd won it on their 3rd ever date. Abbott claimed he'd never won the turkey hunts, and that her being there had caused him to win. She was his good luck charm. She smiled. Good luck charm. She missed being called that. On the wall next to the shelf was an assortment of family photos. In the center of them all, the largest photo was herself, Abbott, and their 15-year-old son, Michael. It was a recent photo from the Christmas shoot last year. Michael was wearing a hideous wool sweater he had gotten from Elizabeth's mother the Christmas before. His naturally curly hair was straightened and parted to the side, and his glasses were folded and tucked into the collar of that disgusting sweater. Her smile grew more, her lips parting to reveal her crooked teeth in the reflection of the glass as she stared at her boy. If anyone could make that dreadful sweater look normal, it was her Michael. Her vision refocused to the mountain of paperwork ahead of her, and she sighed with disdain, her smile fading. As Elizabeth picked up her pen to begin the miserable process, she heard Abbott's truck pull up in the gravel driveway. He came in through the kitchen door a moment later, taking off his snowy boots on the mat. He walked past her without saying a word, stinking of gunpowder and going into the bedroom to hang up his rifle. She tried to ignore him and focus on her work, but something was off about it all. "Where's Michael?" she shouted across the house. A few seconds passed. "Abbott? Yeah, Bill?" Abbott stepped out of the bedroom wearing his winter jacket, without his winter jacket. His legs looked swollen and fat because of his snow pants. Where's Michael? She asked him. He waved her off and shrugged. I tried talking to him and he stomped off to hunt on his own. You know how he can be. When? Abbott didn't respond. When did that happen? She asked louder this time. He shrugged again and stared into the corner of the room as if trying to recall. Oh, I don't know, an hour ago? Elizabeth nodded in agreement, but her brow furrowed. Michael could be moody, sure, but he knew better than just to go alone when they were hunting, especially in his condition, and this time of year. Oh, did you get anything? She asked. Abbott shook his head and went back into the bedroom. Elizabeth turned back to her table, her eyebrows furrowed, finished the sheet in front of her, and dropped it onto the completed pile on the far side. A moment later, Abbott shuffled past her and went to brew a pot of coffee. This one's from the hospital for Michael's treatment. Abbott didn't stop pouring the coffee ground into the filter. Abbott, I think we need to sell one of the horses this time. We're spread too thin to cover the expenses for the company, mortgage, and Michael's bills. I'm sure we could find a buyer for Rio Grande or Soaring Cock. Abbott slammed the coffee machine's lid shut, making Elizabeth jump. We're not selling any of the horses. He spun around to look at her, and Elizabeth could tell something was bothering him. Well, we need to sell something because we can't pay for Michael's bills otherwise, he said, her voice rising. We'll take a loan, he shouted back. The bank's not going to give us another loan. We haven't even paid off our last two. The horses are our income. We'd be shooting ourselves in the foot. If that's the case, why'd you shoot Drifting Ivy in June? Abbott stammered. Ivy's leg broke. He could have healed. Abbott turned back around and picked up a coffee pot to set in the machine. Elizabeth's heart began to race. Her face got hot and she fidgeted in her seat again. Ivy was suffering, he said. Michael's sick, Abbott, Elizabeth said, interrupting. He's suffering. And what about us? No one's coming out for riding lessons. There aren't any shows. My animal clinic isn't even scraping by. We are broke and we're suffering. So what? Are you going to shoot us too? Abbott flinched. She calls Elizabeth flinched. Abbott lived for a good fight. He never backed down from the challenge, not ever before. Abbott? He quietly set the pot he was going to use back on the table, his hand shaking, and walked back towards the bedroom. Abbott, what's wrong? Elizabeth sat there, staring at the bedroom hallway, waiting for Abbott to come back out with the argument. He would come back out, and they could finish the fight, like always. He never came. Instead, the coffee machine started spewing hot coffee everywhere. Oh shit, Elizabeth muttered as she jumped up from her seat, knocking some of the papers onto the ground. She rushed over and slid the pot into place, steaming brown liquid spraying across the floor and onto the papers. As the coffee soaked into her forms, she grabbed a towel off the fridge door and threw it onto the molten puddle. Her hands burned, but she didn't stop dabbing at the paper until the puddle was gone. While she waited for the papers to dry, and while she waited for her hands to stop steaming, her eyes settled on the brown-stained sheets on top of the rest. As she read it, tears began to well up. It was the bill for Michael's chemotherapy treatments for the last few weeks. They were tens of thousands of dollars, but the dollar signs seemed to fade away the longer she looked at the sheet. All she could think about was her Michael, her only son, who had to go through such bullshit. He should be going to parties and making mistakes. Instead, he just stayed at home or in the hospital. And his hair, his goofy, curly black hair, was all gone. She let out a silent sob. She couldn't help him, her boy, her only son. She collected the dried papers, stood up, and set them on the table. She might not be able to wave a magic wand and fix all of her baby's problems, but this she could do. Elizabeth quietly sat back down, wiping the tears from her eyes. She didn't care how arduous the task was or how much money it cost her. She was going to make sure her boy survived. Hours passed, and her hand ached from paper after paper, promising money she didn't know if she had or not. She glanced up and out the nearby window. Dusk was beginning to fall. She looked around to see if Michael had snuck in while she was occupied, but couldn't see his boots or his jacket, nor was he in the living room. Frustrated and in need of a break, she got up, stretched, and donned her winter coat and a flashlight. Abbott, I'm worried about Michael. It's getting late. Can you help me look for him? She called out. There was no response. Abbott. She shook her head, figuring he must still be upset about earlier. She buttoned everything down and started into the forest. Heavy snow clung to the branches, a maze of cold mud and dead trees that stretched out into the darkness. Elizabeth clutched her coat tighter to her chest, the beam of her flashlight quivering from her cold hand. Each step was marked by the percussive beat of crunching ice and twigs underfoot. As she wandered through the woods, occasionally calling out Michael's name, she wondered why what she had said had upset Abby so much. What was it? Did he take it as an accusation that she believed that Abbott had it in him to kill the two of them? She shook her head. Surely she knows how much she loves him. He may be a hunter, but he's no murderer. And she knew how much he loved Michael and her. Nothing would change that. So why had it upset him? Elizabeth was jolted out of her thoughts as something rolled under her foot. She caught herself and then turned on her flashlight to get a better look. Below where she was standing laid a fresh .308 casing. She paused and picked it up. Hadn't Abbott said he hadn't caught anything? If so, why the casing? And it was his. She knew for sure since his gun had reeked of that gunpowder odor and he used a .308. How would a hunter as skilled as Abbott miss? He wasn't a perfect shot by any means, but he was damn good. And he wouldn't waste a bullet if he knew he could miss. Too expensive. Something wasn't sitting right in her stomach. The way Abbott was acting, the round, the gunpowder, there were lines forming in her head, connecting these things in ways that she just couldn't see yet. She pocketed the casing and trekked on, determined to unravel this mysterious conspiracy. She felt she had been wandering for hours, walking in circles through the forest. Night had fully fallen, and she was relying solely on her flashlight to see. She was shivering at this point, a huddled mess bundled in her patched coat. Her calls from Michael had turned into desperation, a plea to the world to give her back her son. Maybe he made his way back while I've been out, she said to herself in a vain hope. Abbott just missed because of a gust of wind, and that was it. She stumbled forward, her fingers froze into the flashlight as she clutched. As the light danced across the trees, a glint in the branches caught her eye. She shambled toward it, each step a struggle as it got colder and colder. Her vision was blurry from tears frozen to her eyelids, but she could see it clear as day. There was a piece of Michael's ugly, disgusting sweater, a small scrap of it, clinging to a branch. She picked it up and held it, her fingers turning to life as adrenaline coursed through her blood. She felt reinvigorated, a new sense of purpose within her, one that was also accompanied by a deep dread. Her heart raced. She looked around for some sign of her location, a landmark of anything, but there was nothing. Without care, she ran into the brush. She must get home, get Abbott, the police, someone. She couldn't think. She couldn't breathe. Her son was missing, gone, out there somewhere in this hell. He could be hurting, he could be dying, he could be dead. She ran and ran and ran and ran, branches scraping and cutting her, but she did not care. An eternity went by, her legs barely able to keep upright. She finally saw the light from her house. With the last of her energy, she climbed the hill. In the frame of the shadowy door, illuminated by the kitchen light inside, stood Abbott, unmoving. His shoulders were almost as wide as the door itself. Elizabeth collapsed at the top of the hill, gasping for air, but he stood, unmoving. Michael, she cried out, her throat burning. She held up Michael's sweater cloth as if it was the key to Abbott's compassion. He did not move. She waved it around, hoping, praying he would do something, go find him. He still didn't move. His face was contorted and it denied his shame. Elizabeth rose to her feet and pushed him hard. Do something! A tear ran from his eye, followed by another, his breath stuttering, but he didn't move. She ran past him into the house, moving through each room until she got to Michael's bedroom. It was empty. She sobbed, her mind flooding with panic and fear. Her eyes met Abbott's, and all she could see in them was sorrow and regret. I did what I had to, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Elizabeth's ears began to buzz, as if a million flies spun around her. You, Elizabeth could feel her throat closing up. You did what you had to? Abbott's lip quivered in shame, his back touching against the wall with a soft thud. I couldn't stand by and watch him suffer anymore. Abbott sobbed. He fell while we were out. He looked so. Elizabeth pushed him in the chest. Say it, you fucking coward. He looked dead already, like just a walking corpse, Abbott said. There was no fight in his voice, no anger, just shame. And then he asked me to have it slid down the wall, huddled into his knees. He was my boy, and he was in so much pain, and I couldn't do anything. So when I could, he began to shake. I'm sorry, Elle, but I did what I had to do. Elizabeth's blood began to boil under her skin as the buzz in her ears grew louder and louder, Abbott's words bouncing around in her skull. What he had to do. What he had to do. Well, she knew what she had to do now. Thank you.
I'm not sure how Frank felt about that story. All right. Our final writer tonight is Kirsten Burks. Kirsten is from outside Indianapolis, Indiana, and enjoys crafting, music, and cosplay. During the time pursuing a BFA, they say participating in organizations like PG Inklings and events like Winter Wheat has helped them grow in their writing, find their own voice, and build a community of writers who support them. They say the best thing that happened during the BFA experience is the friendships I formed with great people who are also great writers. Kirsten's advice for BFA students is write everything. Even if you think it'll be bad, even if you aren't sure about it, write it. If you keep waiting for the perfect piece to write, you'll never write anything. It's pretty good advice. In their own pursuit to write anything, Kirsten injects her own magic and imagination into the real world, creating stories where the tensions between characters could destroy not just the moment, but the very fabric of the world around them. And even if things don't completely unravel, we feel like they could. And so we're compelled to know the fate of the characters as they teeter on the edge of reality. These moments can be a short flash of a relationship, a world without stars, or an explored fear of the ocean. All of them a reflection of Kirsten and what they want us to see, how they want us to feel about the people and places we live with. So take stock of what you see and what you feel as Kirsten unveils these moments to us. Please, help me welcome Kirsten Burks.
Sorry. Okay, so since I know everybody's like probably really excited to get out of here, I have some shorter pieces, but I do have 3 of them. So I've got 2 flash pieces and a short story for you guys tonight. So this first one is a flash fiction piece and it's titled Butter. She keeps the butter in the fridge. This is something I noticed when we first started dating on one of the many occasions in which I had visited her apartment. We were watching a movie and I went to get another drink for each of us. As I reached into the fridge for 2 hard lemonades, I saw it. The butter on the top shelf of the fridge door. While I was aware that some people did this, I had never actually seen it before. I never assumed then that it would grow into a problem such as this. I never thought that it could drive a wedge between us. But back then it was hard to see that anything could ever tear us apart. It's back in the fridge today. After months of asking, begging her to please leave it on the counter where I placed it, she continues to move it back to the fridge. No matter how much I explain it to her, she doesn't seem to care. It's just how I was raised, she'll say in defense of her actions. I don't want it to go bad. It won't go bad, I explain through an exasperated sigh, and putting it in the fridge makes it harden up. It makes it very difficult to work with. She nods, feigning understanding, and goes on with her day. Yet every time I come back to it, it's once again ice cold, rock solid. It's in the fridge. I move the stick from the shelf and place it back on the counter, hoping that it thaws out a little before I have to spread it on the rolls for dinner tonight. She never does the cooking, yet she takes control of the kitchen in ways that trip me up in the middle of my stride. I slave away over a hot stove, working tirelessly to make sure she has a warm dinner to come home to, and yet she places a speed bump in my path and laughs at my pain as I stumble and fall. She waits anxiously in the living room, watching whatever's on MTV, pretending she doesn't care that dinner won't be ready for another 5 minutes. She does care. She cares a lot. And yet, when I ask her not to put the butter in the fridge, she doesn't listen. She disregards my wishes and then pesters me when her actions impede my work. I take a deep breath and remind myself that it's just butter. I shouldn't be causing myself this much stress over butter. As the pot on the stove begins to boil, I hear the lock on the front door click, followed by the steady creaking of the door. She's home early. "Hey, babe," she calls from the hall as her newly removed heels clack into place in the shoe rack. "What's for dinner?" The smile I heard in her voice when she entered fades as she rounds the corner and sees me. Here I am, just barely dumping noodles into the boiling pot as she sets her purse down on the table. I try to tell myself that the heat in my face is from the steam, but even I know that I'm a bad liar. She tries to hide the contempt in her face as she comes over and gives me a half-hearted kiss on the forehead, playing with my hair as I work. She knows I hate this. I've told her time and time again that just because she enjoys people touching her hair doesn't mean that I do as well. Yet here she is, tugging the strings once again. This is how she likes it, so this is just how it's going to be. This next piece is a short story that I actually wrote freshman year and that I have been revising ever since. So it's finally coming out of workshop purgatory, and I think I'm letting it be. So this one is called The Ocean. The ocean was always my friend. Ever since I was a little girl, I remember her being kind to me. I would spend all day playing by her shore, making sand castles as she licked at my feet, cooling them down from the hot summer sun. When the heat became too much, she would beckon me to come to her, enveloping me in her cool, refreshing embrace, and I would spend hours wading through her waters. I would hear her calling to me in the night. The sound of her waves crashing against the shore would sing to me, pulling me out of bed. As if in a hypnotic state, I would sneak down the stairs of our little beachfront house and run to her. I would lay my head right along the shoreline, and she would hold my head in her chilled hands, freezing my ears until I shivered. But I didn't care. I would lie there for hours, letting her push and pull at my head and play with my hair. She would send me little sea creatures to play with. She wanted me to have more friends. She wanted me to feel loved. And I did. One day, when I was very young, while I played on the beach and the ocean tickled my toes with her occasional waves, I met a little boy. I noticed him watching me from a distance as the sun crept up over the horizon, highlighting his features. He was a thin boy, with a dark tan. While I had never seen him on my beach before, I assumed that he too spent a lot of his time outside. Maybe the ocean is also his friend, I thought to myself. Maybe she also tickles his feet while he makes sandcastles, or maybe he prefers to stand on her shore and let her hug him. Maybe he's like me. He had been watching me from far away for quite some time. We were the only two kids on the beach in the early morning. In fact, we were the only people, save for the occasional elderly couple holding hands and walking along the golden, sun-washed shore, admiring the pastel pinks and oranges that covered the horizon. I assumed he wanted to play with me. I waved to him, letting him know that I was friendly. The ocean waved too. We invited him over with a smile, and he obliged. When he approached me, however, he was not smiling. He looked angry. He looked like he wanted to hurt me. "What are you looking at me like that for, huh?" he screamed, and pushed me to the ground. I didn't reply. I was so small I don't think I would have known how to. I just lay there on the ground, crying. I watched as he smashed my sandcastle to pieces, all the while screaming about how an icky little girl shouldn't be looking at him in the first place. He yelled about me being alone and how when his friends got there, they would all teach me a lesson. He kicked sand in my face for emphasis, then ran to go swimming. I cried for a moment longer until I felt a tap on my leg. The ocean grabbed my attention, letting me know that I was not alone and that my friend would be the one teaching him a lesson. I I sat up and watched as the boy waded through the shallow water, all the while still yelling and taunting me. He continued farther out into the water until one of the largest waves I'd ever seen dragged him under. For a moment, there was silence until he resurfaced, spitting out water and crying in fear, before being dragged under once more, never to resurface again. I smiled, and a little giggle escaped my mouth as the ocean patted my legs in reassurance. As the years went on, I had less and less time to spend with my beloved friend. Whole days turned into afternoons, years turned into summers, until eventually I left. I went to college not far from my hometown, but far enough inland that I wasn't able to see my friend save for a few weeks out of the year. In those weeks, I still spent many a night with her chilling waters braiding and unbraiding my hair until I nearly fell asleep. In those moments, I wanted nothing more than to spend my life by her side. However, my wants and needs, as with many others, did not remain stagnant. I met a girl. No, not a girl, a woman. The most charming and alluring woman to ever enter my life. She was incredible. She was a dream. She was perfect. Her long, dark hair fell from her shoulders in waves like little black waterfalls. Her smile could light up a room in seconds. Her eyes were the color of mocha with cream, swirling in and out of my dreams, my deepest hopes and fantasies. She loved me. She loved me in a way that nobody had before. She would look at me and smile. Her eyes would light up like little candles in a windowless room. The way she held me felt like being coddled in sweet clouds, soaring above the earth where nothing and no one could ever hurt me. We spent hours together. Those hours turned into days, days turned into weeks. She completed me. Soon enough, it felt stranger to spend my time away from her than it did to spend it in her company. We did everything together. She would take me out to dinner, I would take her dancing. She would take me out for coffee, I would buy her lunch. She offered me a space in her apartment. I said yes. When I could not spend my nights with my friend, I spent them with her. She would secure me in her warm embrace as she braided and unbraided my hair, and we talked. We talked about everything. We talked about our hopes, talked about our struggles. We talked about our future together. We made plans, we had ambitions. We wanted to travel the world someday. We planned to buy a boat, as she had an affinity for sailing, and set out and see as much of this beautiful planet as possible. I rejoiced at the idea. I smiled at how wonderful it would be to travel the world, accompanied by my love and with my friend so close by. The future, our future, sounded perfect. Until one day she asked me to make that future official. She took me to a park, the same park where we had our first date. We walked hand in hand along the trails and paths until we came to the fountain at the center of the park, where we'd had our first kiss. She stopped and got down on one knee, looking up at me, and holding out a ring, she smiled. I love you. Will you be mine? I cried, I smiled, I said yes. I decided to pay my friend one last visit. Late at night, I stood at her shore with my fiancé and told her. I fiddled with my ring, twisting it back and forth and moving it around on my finger, smiling at how perfectly it fit. And I told her everything. I introduced her to the love of my life, told her about the wedding. I told her about my fiancé's new job. I told her I'd be moving inland and might not see her for quite some time. All the while, she reached and grasped harder for my feet, her icy touch making them numb. I began to shiver. I began to cry. My fiancé reached her arms around my shoulders in support. I told her that I would always appreciate her, that I loved her and everything she had done for me, and I would never forget her. But that wasn't good enough for her. Her waves played the hypnotic tune that they had all those nights when I was a child, only this time the tune rang stronger, drawing me not only to her shore but into her waters. The ocean's pull ripped me from the arms of my beloved and pulling me into her arms instead. The tune rang on as I cried in protest, begging her not to make this harder than it already was. I could hear my fiancé sobbing behind me. I tried to resist as she beckoned me forward. Step after step, I could feel her tugging my ankles, forcing me farther and farther into the current. Eventually, she had drawn me out so far that I could no longer reach the sand below her water. I struggled and flailed, attempting to remain afloat. My fiancée cried out for me from the shore. The ocean engulfed me in her frozen embrace and dragged me under, just as she had with that little boy all those years ago. But this was different. It had to be. She was my friend. These thoughts soared through my head as I fought to resurface. I gasped for air before sinking below the surface once more, and through the sounds of my struggle and the lapsing waves, I heard a whisper, "I love you." And then this last piece is another very short flash fiction piece that I've written. And it's titled Starlight, Starlight. Nobody really knows exactly what day the stars vanished. Scientists say it was likely sometime in the last year. However, the phenomenon is thought to have gone long unnoticed. Given the high percentage of the population that inhabits bustling cities infested with light pollution, many people didn't even realize until long after, when it was already too late. They had become far too accustomed to staring up at an inky black night sky, seldom a bright speckle in sight. When the report came out, people fled to the countryside to see if the rumors were true. Campsites were overbooked. Motels near the most rural parts of the country flashed their no vacancy signs, some for the first time since they opened. Everyone felt an undying need to verify that this beautiful phenomenon that had struck wonder into their childhood minds was actually gone forever. Every night, for months, the fields and forests were packed with people staring into the pitch black and mourning the loss of something they hadn't truly appreciated in years. Many people cried. Others got down on their knees like children, begging the stars to come back. All around, murmurs of the age-old starlight, star bright nursery rhyme could be heard between sniffles and sobs. Mere months ago, each and every one of these people were completely content to never seeing another star in their life. In fact, it had never even crossed their minds when deciding to move to the big city. And yet, here they sit, staring into a void and suffering a loss their hearts couldn't conceive until it came to pass. Thank you.